Excellent.
Hello. So good to be with Rosie and Kevin today to talk about the upcoming Relational Mindfulness Retreat. To get started, Rosie, would you mind guiding us through a sit so that we can get settled?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, finding a position that feels supportive for your particular body for the next few minutes. And if it feels supportive to you, you might let your eyes close. And as we settle into this period of practice, what you might notice is some thinking. Seeing if, as well as noticing any thoughts, you can drop your attention down into the physicality of you. So that you quite literally experience the contact points and position of your feet and legs. The way that your pelvis rests down. What's the experience of the pelvis like? And then including your backbone, your rib cage and shoulder blades, not necessarily thinking about them, but resting your attention within them. And including the arms and hands. So that you're quite literally feeling your way into presence. And then including your neck and your head. So that might be some sense of knowing the experience of the body, knowing the experience of the mind. And if it feels supportive, you might notice that the breath is happening. You might choose to rest your attention in the experience of the body and the changing pattern of sensation of breath. You might choose, if the breath feels tricky, to rest your attention in your hands. And as you cultivate awareness, this knowing of your experience, seeing if you can invite a quality of receptivity so that whatever's known in your experience can be included, received with some quality of warmth. and kindness. And really knowing that there's no right experience to be having. There's only this, how you actually are. And cultivating this capacity to include it. So now just starting to move your fingers, your toes, maybe having a little stretch, and bring your attention back.
Oh, thank you. It wasn't in the guidance that I feel I'm smiling.
Hmm.
So I'm so glad we get to spend time to talk a little bit about the upcoming retreat today. And to start, do you mind, both of you, maybe talk a little bit to briefly introduce yourself? Um, yes, because I think most of us are familiar with Kevin, but not so much with Rosie. So we'd love to hear from both of you.
Shall I start? Yeah? Okay. So my name's actually Rosalie, but most people call me Rosie. And I have had a meditation and yoga practice for over 30 years. And I began my training in teaching mindfulness-based approaches in 2006. And I currently work as a supervisor of mindfulness teachers, as well as a trainer. And I teach my own 8-week mindfulness courses, which I really love. And I'm also an insight dialogue teacher and interpersonal mindfulness teacher. And so I teach retreats and also 8-week courses. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here and excited about this collaboration.
I guess this is my turn. First of
It
all,
is.
thank you, Rosie and Maggie, for prompting the question. Um, I looking back, I probably practiced for meditation for 20 years, and I started learning to teach MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, now 16 years ago. And currently, I am an MBSR teacher. I'm an MBCT teachers. I'm also an MBSR supervisor, teacher trainer, as well as MBCT as well. And I've been doing this training mainly in Chinese, in mainland China, since 2000, in terms of teacher training, since 2018. And in terms of teaching MBSR since 2011. 2011 when I started teaching MBSR and then became teacher trainer and start training new teacher in 2018. And also I also do retreat, a more traditional insight tradition retreat, mainly to support new teachers, mindfulness-based teachers. And I started practicing insight dialogue in 2014. And currently I'm an insight dialogue teacher, not so much leading insight dialogue retreat, but sharing some insight dialogue practices. And also I'm IMP, Interpersonal Mindfulness Program teacher since 2017. And this is my experience in this arena. So, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your really rich experiences. And I'm really curious, if you don't mind sharing, what got you onto this teaching path where you were not always mindfulness teachers? What were you doing before, and how did you start teaching this?
Yeah, well, I prior to training to teach mindfulness-based approaches, I was working in education. I was teaching English to foreign students, and that gave me a very good pedagogical foundation for teaching. And then I went to India for maybe 3.5, 4 months, and I was really wondering what I would do with my life that would feel meaningful, because I knew that it wasn't teaching English in a public education college. And I realized that I wanted to teach people meditation because I'd benefited from it so much myself. It was really a really important guiding thread in my life. And I'd heard about John Kabat-Zinn and the mindfulness-based program. And so I applied to Bangor University. They were offering a master's degree, which I did over 5 years. And I really feel that I have been very fortunate to find a vocation, because from that point of entering into the training, there's a saying in a Celtic saying, which says, "May the wind be at your back." And once I started that training, the wind was at my back. You know, it was like, then I was invited by the university to become a supervisor, to offer training. And yeah, it was amazing. And then simultaneously, I read an article about Insight Dialogue in a magazine called Insight Journal. And I was so excited. I read the whole, I went to the Insight Dialogue website. I read the whole website. I never do that. And then I went on a retreat in Ireland, and I was engaged in the relational practice. And at that point, I'd been meditating for about 15 years. So I had an established practice. But when I was sitting in the relational practice, I suddenly experienced this kind of quickening of my practice. The quality of my presence became so refined, and being with other people, I started to have insights about my conditioning and patterning in relationships with other people. And also because the topics for reflection were drawn from wisdom traditions, it helped me to get insight into my mind and about life. And then I was invited by Gregory to train as a retreat teacher. And so I've been involved in that community for about 16 years. And that's where I met Kevin, but we'll get on to that later. And also Maggie, I met in the mindfulness-based world. No, in Thailand, actually, yes. Insight Dialogue. Yeah. How about you, Kevin?
Well, thank you for prompting that. And I really like that Caltech saying, the wind at your back, and it sounds like it's still blowing.
Yeah, that's right. It's blowing me all the way to China.
Yeah, in some way, that in that sense is similar, but also different in a sense. But I will come back or circle back to that Celtic wind analogy. I was a business person. I have an undergraduate degree in hotel management, and then I did my master degree in business administration in the UK, and then I've been always a business manager. I was in merchant acquisition kind of work. And for me, it wasn't. I wasn't so searching on what to do with my life. It was really make money, be successful was the motivator. Except that after working for in the business world for 20 years, close to 10 years of which I had insomnia, because I was based in the UK and I need to travel a lot, long haul, because my area of supply responsibility was Asia Pacific, so I need to fly to different time zone a lot, and then I developed insomnia. And later on, it became so bad. I was looking at everything under the sun to support, to cure, finding a cure for my insomnia. After failing in every turn, medicine, herbal and Western, nothing seems to work. And it was out of desperation, I turned to meditation, really. So I fulfill one of those things that John Kabat-Zinn said. I mean, is the suffering, is the stress that pushed me into the practice. So I wasn't very spiritual, but that's the doorway in to the practice. And because of my business background, I didn't know anything about meditation, even less so on maybe the Buddhist teaching where those meditation was based. So I found really fish out of water, and I didn't know how to approach this. I found it was very supportive, but I'd be scary for me. And that's when I came across John Kabat-Zinn, because he was using this scientific approach in MBSR to seems to be very supportive, scientific research, and being a business person, I want to know what is going on. And that's how I went to UMass to train as an MBSR teacher, not because I wanted to become an MBSR teacher. I just want to get to know the science. I just want to know I'm not getting myself into something crazy, because it definitely worked, but I didn't know how it worked. So I went to learn. And then at that time, I was already based in Beijing, China. And then after I finished, a friend of mine, both of us went together, and then we started doing a cycle of teaching. So I reluctantly participate. And then afterward, John Kabat-Zinn came, and then I was being recruited to become one of the translators. And then almost like by accident, that's when the Celtic wind that you mentioned started to blow in my back, and basically blowing me all the way to start teaching and sharing, and went on to do more with the mindfulness-based program, including MBSR and BCT. And I came across Insight Dialogue in 2014. Again, it has something to do with MBP, because it was 3 years or 4 years after I started teaching. And I always find it challenging to be with a group of 20 people, meeting them, sharing and then meeting them, I find myself very not at ease. And then at that time, my supervisor was suggesting, this is something to do with the relationality and how do I meet myself, my stress, and then a person on the spot that is really coming together. And that's when I would suggest to maybe want to try something called the Insight Dialogue. I didn't know what it was, but I felt drawn. So I bought a ticket and then went to a retreat by Gregory Kramer in Minneapolis. Then in 2014, that's how I started. So I have MBP, Mindfulness-Based Approach to Thanks, to prompt me to investigate this kind of practice. And that is now 2025, now 11 years ago. And I found it very, very supportive to myself. And hopefully nowadays my participants are also benefiting from my practice. That's because it's supportive for me to become a mindfulness teacher. Not so much to teach it, but to meet whoever is in front of me, including myself, right at that moment, because it's relational with myself and relational to anyone who is in front of me. And that is how I started by accident. But the Celtic wind it brew, and here I am. Thank you, Maggie, for the question.
Oh, so lovely to hear about how the wind has blown you all the way here. The beautiful stories. And that got me curious, like, how do you yourself actually benefited from the relational practice? This just came up because you were both touching on how you've benefited a lot from kind of individual meditation and then started exploring insight dialogue, teaching interpersonal mindfulness. And how does this actually benefit you? Like, I don't know, in your day to day or when you teach or when you interact with students, do you want to give some examples if that feels relevant? Or like kind of more how, like it sounds oh, it's a relational practice, but how do you sense it in your life? How do you apply it?
Did you want to start, Kevin? Or should I? Okay. Well, for example, now, we're relating, and I'm very aware of what's happening internally. So I'm able, when I'm in relationship with other people, to track what I'm experiencing. And from that awareness of what I'm experiencing, be able to make informed decisions about what I say. So I'm not kind of caught in a kind of automatic pilot of just, saying whatever comes into my head. So in terms of my relational life, on the everyday basis, I think that engaging in the interpersonal mindfulness practice or the insight dialogue practice supports me in integrating what I've learned into my daily life. So I'm much more able to pause, to be mindful, and to invite the qualities of the guideline relax. So what can happen is when we're relating, as maybe people will recognize, is that we can really get stimulated either by wanting more pleasure from the relational, or feeling resistance and contraction and challenge. And so the guideline relax really allows me to be able to notice what's happening and hold it, so that I'm not intensifying the stress that can come with either relational pleasure or relational challenge, so that I can stay present in the midst of that. And so in some ways, that's a kind of practical aspect in terms of reducing reactivity. But I think a deeper and more profound aspect is that through the insight dialogue practice, and particularly that initial retreat, I tasted the potential intimacy and richness of being in relationship with other people in presence. And that is, once you've tasted that, well, for me personally, I never forgot. And so, I would say that my life is deeply enriched by relationships that are based in authenticity, that there's a real quality of openness and connection that I experience with others, and that the relational practice allows for a deepened level of insight into the human condition that I don't get on my own. So it really is an extension of my practice and my study of how to live well and in a way that is both beneficial to myself and to other people. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Well, thank you for just hearing what you said, and I think by and large, my experience is along the similar vein, but my journey and perspective, again, everyone's different, of course, and it was a little bit different because I started my practice with the more traditional Vipassana, the insight practice, which is a solitude personal practice. And with that, propelled me into investigating and try to understand the science. And then I went to MBSR and learned about that. So my practice has always been personal practice, solitude practice as the main practice, which went quite well, I felt, and was supported. But of course, and to me, insight dialogue back then, obviously, again, the reason for me to start was almost utilitarian, because when I was teaching, I need to relate to people. And there was a degree of unease, because I felt I was satisfied, I was very happy for my personal practice to be solitude practice, sitting by myself. And I enjoyed that. But because of the teaching, I do have to relate to others, and that creates some tension in me. And then I find it very difficult to explain myself, how to link personal practice with the everyday, day-to-day interaction with the rest of the world. And though, speaking of the first retreat that really enticed me, you and I would experience the same guideline, pause, relax, open. At that time, it's trust emergence. Now it's attuned to emergence, and so on and so forth. But interestingly, yes, I was practicing with another person. Yes, I did have insight. But interestingly, for me, the insight was actually the relation. It made me more clear with the relation with myself. Right at that moment, when someone says something, and how does that impact how the body was feeling, the mind, everything was arising. And that became so vivid for me. So what interested me, I think we're getting in the same place. But for me at that time, what really got me was, wow, I could notice all this happening so vividly and clearly at that moment. So what really got me and encouraged me to continue was I want to go deeper to investigate, but the investigation is in relation with oneself. I have to be honest, that was what really interests me, because of all the long practice I've had is about a solitary practice. But with this way of practice, I can actually discover much more about this body mind. So the relationship that interests me the most was a relationship with this body mind as the starting point. But by doing so, but the more I know about this body mind, it seems that I also could know and make better choices, like what you mentioned, make better choices about how to care for this body mind, as well as care for others and others' body's mind, as well as the environment I'm in, and even in relating to the world as a whole. And that I felt was almost, at that time, I didn't think about it that way, but it was really a bonus. And then that gave me much better insight into like the kindness, you know, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and compassion. And that almost came as an afterthought, but it actually showed up and I recognized it. But all because I getting to know oneself better, and then I could relate to another person or being in a different manner. And that is, to me, the benefit. And almost at that time, afterward, the fact that I could feel much more at ease at teaching is almost the side benefit. It was good to have, but what got me started was just that internal relationality with oneself. Thank you.
Yeah, I can really feel and resonate with the sense of intimacy within, and also connection with others and with the wider world that is encouraged and allowed through this practice, through this really rich relational practice. I'm curious because both of you are insight dialogue teachers and also teach the secular form of interpersonal mindfulness, IMP. And in this coming retreat, we're calling this relational mindfulness. So for those who are like wondering, what are the differences? Do you mind taking us through like how you differentiate between these different names or different ways of looking to the practice?
Yeah, so firstly, to start with the similarities. So, interpersonal mindfulness is rooted in the practice of insight dialogue. So, just as MBSR and MBCT are rooted in traditional Buddhist meditation methods and practices, but are developed for a mainstream or secular population, the interpersonal mindfulness practice is rooted in the Buddhist practice of insight dialogue, but developed for a mainstream or secular population. So the main difference, I would say, is that insight dialogue is Buddhist and interpersonal mindfulness is not. Interpersonal mindfulness draws on wisdom teachings that may be rooted in Buddhist psychology, but may also include psychological developments and research. Kevin mentioned neuroscience. You know, that interpersonal mindfulness can also include let's say, contemporary wisdom traditions. The title interpersonal mindfulness for me feels a little technical. And so the decision to call it relational mindfulness is really a way of allowing people that are unfamiliar with these practices an easier grasp on what it actually is. It's relational mindfulness, it's relational meditation. And so really, and also interpersonal mindfulness is based on a structured 8-week program. So it has a specific curriculum, whereas relational mindfulness relies on the creativity of Kevin and I, in this case, to craft topics for reflection and contemplation that will support our community of practitioners. And so we will be engaging with the guidelines, the same guidelines for ID and IMP, but the topics for reflection will be different from both of those. What do you think, Kevin? Do you have anything to add to that?
Not very much, but I really appreciate what you mentioned, Rosie, about the term interpersonal mindfulness program or practice is a bit technical. Because of my personal experience I just shared, I always feel drawn closer to relational mindfulness because it's intrapersonal. That's what got me starting. But interpersonal, by definition, is almost like you're relating with another person. But for me, my personal experience, yes, I'm relating with another person, but in the same time, I'm also relating with myself. But that is relational, even though the interpersonal portion was there. But even without another person, when I'm sitting by myself, I am still in relation with whatever is arising in this body-mind here and now. So for me, calling it relational mindfulness is almost like even widened the perspective than interpersonal, because otherwise the focal point has to be more than one person. But the fact is, I'm meditating by myself. I'm still in relationship with the moment, with this body mind, and with the temperature and everything. So for me, calling it relational mindfulness is all encompassing and closer to my personal sort of like development or understanding of this particular practice. Maybe that's the only thing that I would add. I don't know whether Maggie, you also a practitioner, maybe you'll feel the same or something. Please do add in your perspective. And Rosie as well.
I love the explanation, like the relational and how it includes the intra, the inter, and also beyond. And so it's more all-encompassing. I still remember, I think it was 10 years ago when I first met Rosie at the retreat in Thailand, the Insight Dialogue retreat. I was feeling this connection with the trees and the leaves falling. I was like, so joyful. So it was this relationship to the world, to something beyond me that, yeah, it's relational, but maybe the word interpersonal might not be enough to capture. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. So if we kind of move a little bit more towards the retreat, I'm curious if you don't mind sharing, how would it look like? Is it going to be just a lot of people with the trees or people with each other, or how would it look like? Can you kind of guide us through what a day would be, what kind of practices people would go through?
Maybe I just go ahead on this one first, and then please do add in any supplementary comment, Rosie. First of all, as a retreat, this retreat we are planning to be in person because in the last few years since COVID, we have a lot of retreat which is online, but this one we felt it would be better served to be an in-person retreat, and it will be held in Beijing in mid-November. Hopefully the temperature and everything will still be nice at that time. And obviously, it may still change, but I think the current thinking is it will have a degree of personal practice, because insight dialogue or interpersonal mindfulness or relational mindfulness are grounded in three different bases. The first basis was meditative quality, the awareness, the mindfulness itself. So, and every day we will spend time to develop, to ground ourselves in some personal practice. And then with that stability, and then we will go into, you make use of like what Rosie mentioned about, we will craft contemplation, reflection. So with wisdom, with the support of wisdom coming from, a different wisdom tradition, including but not limited to Buddhist psychology. And then we will make use of that as some way with the stability, allowing that inquiry to be among maybe a group of 2 or 3 to look deeper with the stability developed through the meditative quality and look into it, and with a small partner, maybe partner of 2 or 3, that we will speak to that whatever arise. And that will involve the reflection, knowing it, putting words to it, speaking, with all the support of this guideline that we will be talking about, the 6 guideline, that we will use pause, relax, open, attune to emergence, listen deeply, and speak the truth. And as we express, as one partner expressing, the other partner would be actually be receiving and listening, and then the practice was the same. And then throughout the day, we will alternate, and that is a relationality, the third basis. Earlier we talked about the meditative quality, which is the stability, and then the wisdom that come in with this light of inquiry, and then the speaking, receiving, reflecting together with those meditative quality and wisdom is the third base of relational mindfulness practice. And then with all 3 together, we will feel into the stability relationship with oneself, relationship with another person, and the wider relationship with the whole group, and even the trees, the environment. So all that would become part of the practice. So also we will have walking period, so we can get in touch with the nature and then be in relationship with the nature. So the whole practice will then unfold over several days when we are together. I guess that is my take of how the retreat will be kind of like be organized. I don't know, Rosie, maybe you have something to add, please.
Yeah, there's something about this sense of having a community of practice and really having a culture of practice. So we'll be held in the container of the retreat center, of the natural environment, and then we'll be held in the container of Kevin and I and the support team, really holding the space for everybody to come together and basically, engage in inner work. I think that often wisdom teachings are considered as something that somebody else has. These wise teachers or these wise books, or but actually insight dialogue is grounded in the perspective that we have wisdom, and that in relationship with others with these particular topics, that through this relational practice we can enliven our own knowledge and understanding, our own the wisdom that rests in us through our life experiences, our practice, and our studies. Sometimes I think about it with the image of a beehive, that we all come together and we make honey. It's a very rare and valuable opportunity that we don't get often in our lives, to come together with like-minded people to bathe or rest in the beauty of the practice, and then to take that honey that we've cultivated together into our lives, with our families, with our local shopkeepers, with our communities, so that it's something that can nourish ourselves and our communities, and ultimately the wider world. So this structure it's a pragmatic structure that we have, but what it helps to cultivate is, I would actually go as far as to say, sublime. So I'm really hoping people will join us and experience those benefits. Yeah.
Just one more thing to add very quickly was, so because it's relational mindfulness, so it will be conducted in an everyday language manner. It will be kind of like a secular, so that it will be very much relatable to our everyday lives. We don't need any specific sort of belief system or religion background or anything. It's really open for everyone, because wisdom is something that we all have, no matter what our upbringing or history is. So I think this is quite important, maybe useful to note here.
Yeah. It's about living well. It's not about any specific religious allegiance. We're all human. We all want to lead lives that are not, just about suffering, but also about happiness and connection and love and yeah. Thank you.
I can feel the sweetness, like in the analogy of the honey, and the accessibility and the sense of connection, and bring it into our everyday life, which sounds so rich. Specifically, I'm curious. I think you two both mentioned it a little bit earlier. Like, if I'm an MVP teacher, if I'm a helping professional, or if I'm just a regular meditator, like, how would I is there some really concrete takeaway that I'm like, okay, I'm gonna really block out these 6 days to attend this retreat? What can I take away with me?
Thanks, Maggie. That's a really good question. Yeah, so as Kevin was describing, the practice of insight dialogue, or interpersonal mindfulness, relational mindfulness, really supports the cultivation of presence, so that we can develop awareness of what's happening internally. However, if we're working with other people, just as Kevin was describing, we're in a relational context. And how do we expand that awareness of internal to include external? So that there's this awareness that's both internal and external. And in some ways, I like to describe the insight dialogue guidelines or the relational meditation guidelines as attunements. So just as we were born with the capacity to be mindful, if you think about a baby, it doesn't need to learn how to be mindful. It's completely mindful. It's, really connected with the world. It's alive. So just as we didn't need to learn that, in some ways, we were supported to remember it. These guidelines are supporting us to remember, to access these qualities for presence that can not only serve our own interests, but can serve the people that we're working with, because we're more attuned to their body language, their tone of voice, the content of what they're saying, and we can be more intuitive because we're not caught up in thinking about what's happening as much. We can access more intuitive ways of knowing that can benefit and inform the people that we work with. One of the training assessments in the mindfulness-based world is how we are relationally. And this practice can really give us a method for bringing presence into our work and our relationships. How about you, Kevin? What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, thank you for really pointing to the core mechanism. I mean, I think for you, what you and I was doing and are doing now is using different way to describe our personal experience, and I'll try to put it in a more concrete terms for me back then, even now as I'm teaching. As a human being, even now after 15, 16 years of teaching, I can still feel myself under stress when I'm teaching. Maybe I didn't sleep well, maybe the group discovery are very different from what I expect it to be, or someone pop a question that I didn't expect. And all of a sudden at that moment, as a teacher, as someone, but it could have been just talking to my wife or my parents. It doesn't really matter. I'm just using as a teacher or helping professional as an example only. When something surprised me, with this practice, with the guideline, I'm more able to be supported by, okay, I'm pausing, becoming aware of what is happening now. What is my relationship with whatever coming externally or internally? Because time and again, I find myself in my early days of teaching, I got carried away. I got excited or I got scared, and then it showed, how I relate to myself and the participant. And with this practice back then, what I found it very useful is, first of all, I know myself much better. I'm more comfortable with myself, and then I can use the second guideline, relax, to receive whatever is happening, not to judge it. I could still feel fearful. I could feel the anger or the tightness, but I'm more able to receive it as it is and open to it. Even, how does it feel? Just as the third guideline suggested to do, internally. And receiving whatever comment or questions or statement made externally towards me or towards the group. That became very supportive for me. And then moving on to the fourth guideline of attuning to, what happened here? As I allow it to sink in, as I allow the other person to express himself or herself more fully, or maybe the facial expression change, in another person or how I feel change, attuning to that. And that gave me become more intimate to the moment, whether it's joy, difficulty, or anything, but I can be more intimate with it. And if I did that, the relation with myself get closer and also with another person get closer. And that, first of all, it's very interesting in itself. And secondly, that really opened a whole new world of possibility of how I relate to the moment, just like what Rosie, you mentioned, that the internal wisdom could arise to meet the moment here and now. And that is, as for me back then as a teacher, as an MBP teacher, I found it very supportive in terms of the second domain, as you mentioned earlier, about as an MBP teacher, the sixth domain. The second one was about relationality, about relationship. And I can become much closer with myself, and I have the possibility to become much closer to whoever is in front of me, and even relating to the whole group. And for me, that was a very concrete sort of like support for myself, but it's not for that sake, but really is through being able to have a closer relationship with oneself and with another, and to the moment that whatever transpired was the side benefit. It came naturally. I didn't do it for that. I did it for having a closer relationship with this body, mind, and with another person. But the natural development was would be able to relate to their moment much better. And that's my personal experience. So
yeah, I just add to that what I'm hearing and what you're saying, which I've seen again and again, is that people who experience relational anxiety, which a lot of people do, and particularly teachers and so on, actually through the practice they find more ease. And that's what I'm hearing you describe, that there's somehow you found more ease through the practice in your teaching and in your relationships. Yeah.
yes, indeed. Thank you.
And I also hear that both of you were using the word attune. And I remember that Gregory used to be a composer. So it's like this attuning the instrument, refining it so that we're closer and more intimate, maybe more precise with the experience. That's what I was coming to mind when you both were talking as well.
Yeah, I love that, Maggie. Attuned to the person or the people that you're in relationship with, as well as attuned to yourself.
And one point I would make on that was and that's why it is a practice, just like playing an instrument. It's a practice. It's not a task. It's not something that bam, I need to do it now. It is really listening to it and paying attention to it, and that is getting closer and closer. And that's why in this retreat, it is really a practice. It is not a skill set that we say, oh, we will develop, and it is interpersonal skill. It is really a mindfulness practice. I just want to emphasize this point. Even though the form is different from more traditional silent meditation practice, but still, this is still a practice. Listening to oneself like an instrument, listening to another person like an instrument, and tune to it. And that was why it is a mindfulness practice. I just want to add this point.
I can feel your enthusiasm.
So, how did this retreat idea come about, and how are you both feeling about this upcoming retreat in Beijing?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, you go first.
It was, I would say, I mean, if I have to put some word to it, I think it really came up of friendship. You know, Rosie and I met in person last year. Is it last year? Oh, no, yeah,
Oh,
last.
yeah, I think last year.
Yeah, but before we met in online because of COVID, and we met each other, and then we met in person in Holland last year, and then we took walks together, and then we kind of practice as we walk, and then we talk and reflect together, and our love of the practice, the introspective practice, the meditative practice we have, our respective journey, as well as how we benefit from the practice of insight dialogue, as well as the relational mindfulness practice. And so this idea came about to say, maybe we could do something together, especially on a secular basis, because we're both so much in love with this is too good to be confined. It's really anyone, please come and join, come and experience it. And it is out of that this idea came about, and saying maybe we could do something together. Because of course in Europe there are many more insight dialogue teachers than in this part of the world. So naturally I want to practice. I want to practice with good friends. So it really came out as like, Rosie, why don't you should we do something together? And this is how it started. And then Rosie, from my perspective, took on this invitation and said yes. And I was so joyous when the day when she said yes to say we would do something together, and she would come to Beijing to do it together. So this is from my perspective. So over to you, Rosie.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can say, that I'd met Kevin a few times online, and, online is so different, isn't it? There's a sort of perhaps a little more of a sense of formality or something. And then I turned up at the retreat in Holland, and I met Kevin, and I was just like, I just thought, what a wonderful person. Sorry, Kevin, I don't mean to embarrass you, but I just thought, oh, I really like this guy. And we went for our first walk because it's a big community. So, you might have a walk with one person and then another person, and it's a limited amount of time. But we just kept wanting to go for walks together. So we had a few walks, and we had some very rich and helpful conversations. And like Kevin said, we share a passion for, making these approaches accessible to everyone. And so this idea of offering a retreat in Beijing came together, and I'm very excited about visiting mainland China. I've never been, and I've met so many amazing people from that place, from that part of the world, that I'm encouraged to come and meet more. So yeah.
Really looking forward to the retreat and for your visit to Beijing. Is there anything you'd like to add and to share with us before we wrap this up? It's been such a rich interview conversation.
I think there's one thing I would add, maybe it's also related to your earlier question about how this came about. I think as I listened to Rosie's share, I think I found another passion that both of us have was about offering alternatives, offering opportunity for people to experience life in any way possible. And for Rosie and I, after I get in touch with Insight Dialogue, the practice, it actually opened my eyes to different ways of practicing and relating. And we felt, I personally at least really feel, I want to share, different way of practicing. I mean, in China, have a long tradition in this kind of practice. In Taoism, Buddhism, and all kind of other practices, so rich with thousands of years of wisdom practice. Because personally, I was touched by this particular practice. I was always forever grateful to Gregory in coming up with this practice. And I just want to offer it, not only because as Rosie mentioned, Insight Dialogue is more Buddhist teaching based or Dharma based. But this way to formulate it, we could open to people who have any predisposition or preference and can come to practice. And this is something that I found exciting and wanting to offer it to anyone who is curious in maybe this kind of practice to see whether it is beneficial. It may or may not be. Do not hold your hope high, but if you're game, if you are curious and maybe finding what we share interesting, yeah, we very much love to see you and then we explore together. For me, do not look at me as a teacher. I think we are just fellow traveler on this path together, and then we can investigate together. I think this is something that's the only thing that I want to add from my perspective.
Yeah, as I was listening and reflecting on the question, I started to really feel into the reality that we exist in relationships. And if our relationships can be, included as part of our practice, and that we can actually learn this relational practice and then learn how to be more present in our relational lives and experience the depth, the richness, and the release from stress that is possible, that's just a fantastic opportunity. And like I said, as Kevin said, this is a real opportunity. And I really hope people will join us in that and find out for themselves. We're saying some lovely things, but come and see for yourself. Yeah, and thank you, Maggie, so much for hosting this so beautifully.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you both, and I really look forward to the retreat.
Me too.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. See you soon. See you all soon.
Okay.
Okay.